It all began with the quiet. Not the calm, industrious silence of a library, but the heavy, uncomfortable stillness of a room where someone just said something very rude. Caleb Thorne was the main person who sold that quiet at Sterling Analytics. My name is Ethan Cole. When I was 24, my world was limited to the four gray walls of a cubicle and the soothing blue light of a dual monitor setup. I was a programmer who had just graduated from a good university with a computer science degree that I had worked hard for. I was brilliant, hard-working, and too much of a people pleaser. I went to work every day before the sun had a chance to say hello to the New York skyline, and I left long after it had hidden beyond the Hudson. I lived on lukewarm coffee and the quiet joy of fixing a very bad piece of code. I did the hard work, the late-night bug patches, and the projects that no one else wanted to do to prove myself. There was a reason for this incessant driving a shadow I was always striving to get away from. Eleanor Vance is my mother. If you work in fintech, you know that name. It's a name that opens doors, a name that means new ideas, strength, and a portfolio that could hold a small country. She is a legend in her own time. And I, her son, didn't want anything to do with that legacy. I wanted to build something of my own, brick by brick, even if it hurt. That's why I used my father's last name, Cole, when I applied at Sterling Analytics, a mid-tier company where no one would know who I was. My biggest goal was to hear someone say, Ethan Cole is a damn good developer, without the unstated add-on, for Eleanor Vance's son. My universe was constructed on the notion of a friendly, collaborative workplace and quiet competence. That was my safe place. Caleb Thorne was the wrecking ball that hit its foundations. He was in his early 30s and was a senior developer on my team. He was quite smart and could talk well. He wasn't dumb, in fact, he was very competent at what he did. But his skill was ruined by a deep-seated sense of superiority and a way of seeing the world that divided people into two groups, tools, or impediments. He walked through the office like a shark, with all the predatory assurance that made people feel uneasy. There wasn't just one explosion that started everything. It was a gradual, methodical poisoning, like a succession of paper cuts to the soul that drained me over the course of 6 months. The work was the first thing. I worked on a beautiful solution to a data parsing problem for a week. And when we met as a team, Caleb looked at it and said, "A bit over-engineered, don't you think? A simple script would have done, but I guess it kept you busy." He never gave me constructive criticism. It was always meant to make my work seem amateurish and naive. Then it got worse. Sarah, a great junior analyst on our team, was working on a new model for assessing risk. She was both afraid and excited to show it off. Her model was truly new. It used machine learning in a way that Sterling had never done before. Caleb sat back in his chair, which made it creak noisily, and cut her off in the middle of her sentence 5 minutes into her presentation. "Hey, it's a cute academic exercise, Sarah," he added, talking to the project manager and not her. "But this isn't a university lab. This kind of model is too sensitive for a live environment. Maybe we should leave the complex stuff to the big boys." He paused and let the quiet hang in the air for a moment before adding with a chuckle, "Maybe mothers should focus on tasks that are less volatile." The temperature in the room dropped. Sarah's face, which had been full of desire, crumpled. She stuttered something about testing data again, but the momentum was gone. The project manager, a man who had his spine removed years ago, just nodded and said, We'll take that under advisement, Caleb. Thank you for the insight." Sarah didn't say anything else for the rest of the meeting. Caleb not only dismissed her work, but he also dismissed her as a person, putting his professional envy in a tidy little box of misogyny. I saw her pack up her laptop, and my stomach twisted with meaningless rage. I wanted to say something, but the words were stuck since I had been taught not to make waves my whole life. Caleb's poison wasn't just for other people. He had a particular bottle just for me. I was an easy target since I was young, eager, and didn't want to fight. I was in the break room one afternoon, filling up my mug, when I heard his voice on the other side of the wall. He was chatting to another senior developer, the kid, Cole. I stopped moving and held my palm over the coffee pot. He's just a workhorse. All grunt, no spine. You can dump anything on him and he'll just say thank you and work all night. He's useful, I'll give him that, but he'll never lead anything. No killer instinct. My ears burnt. It wasn't only about my job anymore. He was picking apart my entire being. It got worse a few weeks later. I wore a new sweater that my mom had given me as a gift. I really liked it. He didn't even look up from his screen when I strolled by his desk. He said to the guy next to him, "Looks like his mom still dresses him." What a weak-looking programmer. I could hear him. Weak. Horse that works. No backbone. In my mind, the words formed a litany of self-doubt. I began to doubt everything. Did I talk too little? Did I want to help too much? Was my desire to create a place where people could work together merely a sign of weakness? Caleb was methodically tearing down the values that I was trying to use to create my profession. The inside of the stronghold was falling apart. My 6-month trial term was up. They gave me a full-time job. The pay was good and the benefits were good. 6 months ago, I would have cried tears of joy when I got it. But suddenly, the idea of spending another day, much less a lifetime, in that toxic bullpen made me sick to my stomach. I did something I never thought I would do. I said no to them. I sent a professional email to HR and my boss saying that I wanted to look into alternative options. I didn't say who. I didn't want to ruin things. I just wanted to leave. It was a Friday when I left. I spent the morning moving my files and drafting up paperwork. I started my goodbye tour around 3 p.m. I moved from one cubicle to the next, shaking hands and bidding folks well. I even managed to give Sarah a tight, polite grin, even though she seemed sad and jealous. In the end, there was only one person remaining, Caleb. My hands were sweaty as I moved over to his desk. I was going to do the right thing. "Hey, Caleb, I just wanted to say that working with you was an experience. Good luck." He didn't even turn his chair. He laughed quickly and sharply, a laugh that broke the office's steady hum. Then he spoke louder so that everyone in our area could hear him. "Ha! I can UIT!" he yelled, finally turning to look at me with a smug, mocking smile. "I told everyone you couldn't handle it." The pressure was too much for little Cole. He stood up, making it a show. "Goodbye. Let's get someone in here who can keep up. Maybe this isn't the right job for you, buddy. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." The hush that came after was the worst one yet. It was complete. Everyone stopped writing. Everyone looked at us. I could sense a lot of people looking at me. Some were sad, some were happy, and some were simply blank. At that moment, I wasn't just an employee who was leaving. Being publicly executed was a failure for me. I was so embarrassed that my face felt like it was on fire. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What can I say? He had turned my quiet exit into a show of how powerful he was. He had won. I turned around and went away, without even bothering to grab my box of things. I just came through the glass doors of Sterling Analytics and into the cold January air, past rows of coworkers who weren't talking. I didn't turn around. The F-train ride home was a flurry of lights flashing and wheels shrieking. The regular noise of the New York City subway was a low roar in the background of the storm in my thoughts. But it wasn't a storm of anger. The first, hot embarrassment had cooled and turned into something else. Something cold, heavy, and thick. It was clear. I looked at the people around me. They all seemed tired and uninterested, and they were all in their own worlds. And I figured something out. The system didn't work. My boss had witnessed how Caleb acted and done nothing. HR was a ghost that only worried about liability, not people. Justice wasn't going to show from out of nowhere. If you let the world decide, thugs like Caleb would always triumph. They would step on individuals like myself and Sarah's backs to get to the top of the ladder and call it success. Just 6 months before, my goal was very clear: to develop a career based on my own merit. But now I had a new, sharper ambition. This wasn't about a fight or a yelling match. It was about something far more basic. People like Caleb Thorne don't deserve to be successful if they make other people miserable. He thought of me as a step on his ladder. In that metro train vehicle that was shaking and wobbling, I made up my mind that I wouldn't let him go any higher. I wouldn't be a victim anymore. The first thing I did when I went back to my modest Astoria flat was take out my wallet. I took out my Sterling Analytics employee ID card. In the mirror, I saw a younger, more hopeful version of myself from 6 months ago. I went into the kitchen, got a pair of heavy-duty scissors from the utility drawer, and with one quick cut, I sliced the card in half. The two pieces of plastic fell on the counter with a soft clatter. It was a simple, symbolic thing, but it meant the world to me. The old Ethan Cole, who took the abuse and hoped for the best, was no longer there. It was only the beginning of a new one. It was a strange limbo for the first few weeks. I worked on my portfolio, updated my resume, and started looking for work. But this time, I wasn't just looking for a job. I wanted to find a place that had a soul. I talked to a dozen companies, from little startups to big corporations. I learned to ask the proper questions, not just about the tech stack, but also about the culture. Some interviewers were surprised, but the smart ones knew what to ask Goo. How do you handle conflict resolution within teams? What's the process for giving and receiving feedback? Can you describe the leadership style of the team manager? That's how I came across Apex Innovations. They were known for their culture as well as being a trailblazer in the fintech field. The interview process was tough, but it was also fair. David Chen, the man who would become my employer, was the last person I interviewed with. He was in his late 40s and had a quiet, thoughtful presence. He didn't only want to know how well I could code. He wanted to know what I was interested in and what type of atmosphere I liked to work in. And for the first time, I told the truth. I didn't say Caleb's name, but I did say, I just left a place where the culture was too competitive. I'm looking for a place that values working together as much as doing things on your own. David nodded slowly, looking like he was thinking. A teams that trust each other do the best work, Ethan. A single brilliant jerk can ruin an entire department. We have a strict no brilliant jerks policy here. I got the job. When I walked into Axe for the first time, it seemed like I was in another world. The office was bright open and full of life, with a low, buzzing sound. People smiled. They looked each other in the eye. They said who they were. It was shocking. For the first few months, I suffered a kind of PTSD from work. When someone complimented my coding, I got ready for the backhanded compliment that never came. I was asked for my opinion in a meeting by the project director, but I didn't want to say anything since I thought I would be shot down. But with David's help, I eventually started to relax. At Sterling, my talent was repressed, but it grew at Apex. I was given hard, complicated tasks and the freedom to finish them. I wasn't a workhorse. I was a valuable member of the group. People asked for my input and thanked me for my work. David called me into his office after a year. Ethan, he continued, getting right to the point. I'm reorganizing the derivatives analytics team, and I want you to be in charge of it. I was shocked. Me? But I've only been here for a year. He smiled a little and said, You've done the work of 3 years in one. You have the skills. And more importantly, your peers respect you. They trust you. I trust you. What do you think? I was put in charge of a project. I could now design the culture of my own team and create the kind of supportive, high-achieving place I had always wanted. I made it my goal. I was still Ethan Cole, the guy who really liked helping people. But now there was something new about Meg, a calm confidence and a strength that wasn't there before. I was still a wonderful person, but I wasn't as naive anymore. I knew that the world could be rough, and that sometimes you had to be rough too. It wasn't until approximately a year and a half into my time at Apex that I really saw the moral gray area I had entered into. David's team was growing, and he often asked me what I thought about prospects for senior development positions. He sent me a resume one afternoon. His email said, "Look at this guy. Comes from Sterling and seems technically sound. What do you think?" My heart stopped. Caleb Thorne was the name on the PDF. I looked at the screen and felt my blood freeze. He was the one. I had to admit that his resume was excellent. Shortly after I departed, he was promoted to senior architect at Sterling. He had a list of successful projects, some of which I knew for sure were built on the backs of junior developers who were burned out. It was all there, proof of a career based on the very bad things I had left behind. There was a war going on inside me. The old Ethan in my head yelled at me to be fair and professional. "He doesn't know you work here. This is a chance to be the better person. Just inform David that you can't give an unbiased evaluation since you have a personal problem." It was the right and clear way to go. But there was another voice, a colder, tougher voice that was born on that subway train, that whispered back. "Fairness. You told yourself he wouldn't be able to keep climbing. He makes everything he touches sick. Are you going to let him do that here? For your team, to another Sarah." I thought about it all night long. I walked around my apartment and typed and deleted a dozen different email responses. This was the time. Was I a man who stood by his beliefs of justice, even for those who had none? Or was I a man who defended his people and the hard-won peace, even if it meant using a well-placed word to hurt an enemy? Just as I was ready to give in to my conscience and step down, my phone rang. I got an SMS from a number I didn't know, but the preview showed a name I knew. Sarah. The text said, "Hey Ethan, crazy question. Are you still at Apex? I just left Sterling and was thinking about applying. Is it as good as it sounds?" After I left, we lost touch, but reading her name was a clue. I called her right away. We talked for an hour. She told me what happened after I left. Caleb felt more confident after getting a promotion. The air had gone from bad to radioactive. 2 other developers from my previous team had also left. She was the last one to get away. "He was a nightmare," she remarked, her voice strained. "He took credit for everything. He put down anyone he saw as a threat. After you left, it was like he had no one left to keep him even slightly in check." Her story strengthened my commitment. This was no longer just about getting back at someone. It was about stopping a known infection from getting into a healthy system. The next morning, I went into David Chin's office and shut the door. "David," I said, my voice firm. "About the candidate from Sterling, Caleb Thorne." "Oh yes, what do you think? His resume is good." I took a big breath. There's no doubt that he's a good developer, but he's the main reason I left Sterling Analytics. David's face went from being interested in management to being concentrated. He bent over. "Go on," I said. "He makes the workplace more toxic than ever. He's a bully. He puts down his coworkers, takes credit for their work, and is especially good at picking on and belittling female engineers. I've seen it happen over and over again. He's a brilliant jerk in the purest sense of the word. If we hire him, we will lose good people. I promise." I told the whole narrative, including what he did to Sarah, without adding anything or making it sound worse than it was. I basically told the truth about what I had seen. David paid close attention and didn't say anything. When I had finished, he was silent for a long minute, his gaze remote. At last, he looked me in the eye. "Thanks, Ethan. That's all I needed to know." The job posting was changed 2 days later. No one at Apex ever talked about Caleb Thorne again. I had done something. I had started the chain of events. I had a dark sensation of contentment, but it wasn't real. I didn't kill him. I only safeguarded my own space. I assumed that was it. I had no idea it was just the start. The key turning point, when the game went from a simple fight at work to something far bigger, happened not in an office but over a dish of pasta. My mom's birthday was that day, so we went to a quiet Italian restaurant in the West Village that she enjoyed for our usual meal. My connection with my mom, Eleanor Vance, was not simple. Of course, I loved her, but I had spent my whole adult life trying to get away from her strong pull. We had an implicit pact to keep our work lives separate. She was proud that I worked at Apex, but she didn't get in the way. She was in a thoughtful mood that night. She was talking about her early days and the problems she had as a woman working in a field that was mostly men in the 1980s. There's no way you could know how much casual sexism we had to deal with, she remarked, swirling her wine. Men who thought you were either a secretary or someone to look down on. It made me stronger, but I promised myself I would never let that kind of thinking happen in my own company. Vance Capital was more than just a business, it was an empire. A lot of women were in charge of the empire, which was well known. It was one of the things that made her most proud. She changed the subject a bit and said, "It sounds like you found a good place at Apex. You seem settled, happier. It's a world away from that first place you were at." "What was it called?" "Sterling." "Yeah, Sterling," I responded, and the remembrance made me feel bad. "You told me there was a real piece of work there. A guy who gave you a hard time. What was his name again? I remember how upset you were." The mother asked the question in a casual way, remembering a hurt her son had shared with her in the past. But pronouncing his name out loud in front of her felt important, like putting a gun together. I said, "Caleb Thorne." It was scary how quickly her mood changed. It was subtle, like her eyes narrowed a little, and her hands, which had been moving before, were still. The pleasant and friendly CEO she showed to the public was gone, and in its place was the sharp mind that ruled boardrooms. "Caleb Thorne," she said again, and the word tasted bad in her tongue. "That name sounds familiar. I think I've seen it recently." She stopped and looked at something over my shoulder. "He's been looking for senior leadership jobs all over the city." My blood turned chilly. Yes, he was. He wanted to do big things. If Apex had said no, it would have only been a small setback. He would be striving higher. "Mom, it's okay. It happened years ago. I dealt with it, handled it." Her eyes came back to mine, and they were like ice. "Ethan, this isn't about you anymore. This isn't about a personal grudge. You told me about a man who publicly belittles his female coworkers and creates a toxic, misogynistic environment." She leaned in and whispered, "This isn't about you anymore. That's not a workplace bully. In my world, that's a walking, talking personnel risk. A lawsuit waiting to happen. A man who acts like that is a liability to any modern company. He's a dinosaur." I instantly got it. For me, this was about getting back at people for things they had done wrong in the past. It was just a simple risk calculation for her. The Caleb Thorne was a bad investment since he had a history of being poisonous. And Eleanor Vance didn't put her money in terrible places. She didn't say anything else about it. After supper, we spoke about other things, and she was my mom again. But I realized that something had happened that I couldn't change. The sound of my words had traveled to a location with much more power than I could ever imagined. I had just gotten a quiet, very strong ally in my own struggle. Caleb Thorne wasn't only on my bad side anymore. Eleanor Vance knew about him. He was no longer just a former coworker I had blocked from one job. He was now a line item on the risk assessment ledger of one of the most powerful people in our field. I didn't need to do anything else. Once the system was set in action, it ran on its own. The underlying irony was that Caleb was the one who caused his own demise. At Sterling Analytics, where Sarah used to work, the exodus had turned into a flood. The fact that so many experienced mid-level coders left in such a short time ultimately raised a red signal among the highest levels of management, who generally only looked at spreadsheets. They began to pay attention to the exit interviews. They recruited an independent HR expert to find out why they were suddenly losing so many good employees. And in each private interview, the same name kept popping up, Caleb Thorne. They heard about how arrogant he was, how he stole credit, and how he would manage out anyone who dared to question him. They heard about Sarah's talk. They heard about how negative he was all the time, which made them feel bad. The consultant's analysis showed that the leader wasn't strong. Instead, he was a toxic asset who was pushing away employees who were worth much more than he was. Management asked Caleb to come in for a meeting. Sarah told me later that it was a disaster, based on what a friend of hers who is still stuck at Sterling said her. Caleb didn't demonstrate any self-awareness or remorse. Instead, he went on the offensive. He was cocky, defensive, and rude. He said that the staff who were leaving were basically B players who couldn't handle the stress. He said they were jealous of his success and advancement. He basically told the senior vice president that the problem wasn't him, it was everyone else. That was the last straw for the people in charge at Sterling. Not only was he toxic, but he also couldn't be coached. They couldn't afford him anymore. Caleb Thorne was let go 2 weeks following that encounter. They took him to his workstation, let him pack one box, and then took him out of the building. The time of fear was over. Caleb, on the other hand, had no idea what was really going on with him. He was a man who was too proud to see clearly. He thought that getting fired from Sterling was a good thing. They didn't see how good he was. They had taken the side of the weak. He would show them. He would get a better position at a bigger, more well-known company and laugh all the way to the bank. His false sense of confidence was nearly impressive. He changed his LinkedIn profile to say, "Looking for new opportunities in fintech leadership," and really started looking for a job. Apex Innovations and Vance Capital were his top 2 targets, and they were the best of the best in New York fintech. This was the high point, but it didn't happen in a fight in a boardroom or a loud, dramatic argument in the rain. It happened in the eerie stillness of an empty inbox. Apex was the first thing. His application, which had been turned down without any ceremony months before, was still in the system. When he applied again for a senior director job that had just been posted, the HR software alerted him right away. DOTPRCED. Internal note from D. Chen. His application was taken down within minutes of being sent. No email, no reason, just a hole. After that, he focused on Vance Capital. This was the most important thing, the big reward. He presumably thought he could move up the corporate ladder there, dreaming of the power and respect that would come with it. He sent in his application, which was carefully written and full of buzzwords and accomplishments. He stayed put and waited. He didn't know that Caleb Thorne was now in an informal but very strong databasing, the common network of senior executives in the city. Eleanor Vance only needed to say a few quiet words to some of her C-suite friends over lunch on the phone. Watch out for this name. High-risk profile. Behavioral issues. No one would doubt Eleanor Vance's assessment. The word traveled through the highest levels of the business like a virus that couldn't be seen or heard. The best part was seeing him slowly figure out, from a distance, that the world had turned against him. I would look at his LinkedIn profile every few days. I observed the optimistic, seeking new opportunities. Taglines stay up for weeks, then months. I noticed him start to comment on blogs in his field, attempting to make connections and stay up to date. His posts were getting more and more harsh and frantic. The fight was the loud quiet that met him. He put out numerous of applications, but they all got automatic rejection emails or worse, nothing at all. The headhunters who had been interested in him a year ago were suddenly not returning his calls. It was the slow, rising terror of a man sitting alone in his apartment, checking his email and LinkedIn page, and seeing the career he had built by stepping on others go away. He was being blacklisted in a way that was both systematic and effective, but no one ever told him why. He was being destroyed by rumors and a network of influence he didn't even know about. It all started with a discussion he had with a young programmer he thought was worthless on his last day. I had to give up something in a way. It wasn't a big, brave one. I gave up my own peace of mind. I let go of the soothing thought that I was above it all and just a victim. I had been involved. I had pulled one thread, and my mother had pulled a far bigger one. Together, we had unraveled a man's whole professional life. That was the option I had to live with. I had one, but it didn't feel good. A few months later, the last piece of the puzzle fell into place. I was getting coffee with Sarah in the Apex break room. She had been doing well at the company, and her confidence and skills were now able to shine. "Did you hear about Caleb?" she inquired in a calm voice. "No, what about him?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "My friend from Sterling told me he finally gave up on fintech. Completely. He moved back to Ohio to live with his parents. Apparently, he's trying to get a job as a high school IT administrator or something." She shook her head. "It's insane. It's like he just left the business. The gone. That was the word. Not fired, not lost. Just gone." The picture was finished. The retaliation was complete, but I didn't feel anything while I stood there and stirred my coffee. No rush of victory. No moral satisfaction. A deep, empty feeling inside. The ghost of the humiliation Caleb had put me through was still there, but now it had someone else with it. It was also accompanied by the calm, disturbing understanding that I had mistakenly used my mother's power. I wanted to get justice and stop a bully from hurting other people. But where was the boundary between justice and destruction? I had exploited connections and influence, things I had hated and fought to get away from my whole life. To get what I wanted. The youngster who had been trying so hard to get away from his mother's shadow had been saved by it. The irony was too much to take. I had become different. That day, the optimistic, somewhat naive guy who walked out of Sterling Analytics was gone for good. In his place was someone who saw the world in colder, more nuanced ways. Several months went by. The cold of winter turned into the tentative warmth of April in New York. Caleb's memory started to fade. It didn't go away completely, but it did fade into the background of my life, like a scar that you forget you have until you touch it. Apex has become a comfortable and fulfilling part of my life. I was in charge of my team, and I was proud of the work we were doing. More than that, I was proud of the way we were accomplishing it. We hired a new person, a young woman named Maya who had just graduated from college. She was very smart but bashful, which reminded me of how I was when I first started. One afternoon, I watched her trying to fix a complicated piece of old code. Her face was tense with anger. I recalled the feeling all too well, being afraid to ask for help because I thought it would make me look stupid. I went up to her desk. I smiled and remarked, "Hey Maya, that's some bad code, isn't it? I spent a week last year fighting with that same module. Come with me to a conference room, and I'll show you how it works." I could feel my chest ache from how relieved she looked. We spent the next hour at a whiteboard. Instead of just giving her the answer, I helped her figure out the rationale so she could come up with the answer on her own. At that moment, when I made a positive space for someone else to achieve, I felt a peace that my retribution had never provided me. Caleb stood for everything that this was not. This was helpful. This was real. My phone buzzed later that night when I was packing to go. My mom sent me a text. "Are you going to eat dinner with me tonight? That little Italian place." For years, an invitation like that would have made me feel anxious and like I was being pulled back into her circle. But suddenly, things were different. I peered out the window of my office at the big, shiny metropolis below. I wasn't afraid of her shadow anymore. I was standing in my own light, which I had made myself, even though she had helped keep it safe. I smiled, and it was a real smile, not a fake one. "Of course," I typed back. "See you there." I had found my answer not in the defeat of an enemy, but in the creation of a better future. The sounds of the bullpen had finally receded, and now I could hear my own voice, clear and confident. I knew who I was. I was Ethan Cole, and I was finally cool with that.